Rich Baris, the People's Pundit, always amazing to have you on. And we're gonna start with abortion. I know this is something you all have been looking into. Obviously, I have a couple specific to SCOTUS cases, and then if there's anything else you want to talk about, I had some viewers put some questions in on locals. So if you're watching this somewhere else, go to alisonmorrow.locals.com because you can put questions in for people like Rich ahead of time. But a year ago, this was a Gallup poll that said record high 47% in US think abortion is morally acceptable. And then we get to the decision. Broad majority of Americans didn't want Roe v. Wade overturned. Polling prior to Supreme Court decision shows. So we go from 1 year in 2021 where the Gallup poll shows that we're basically split. And then we go to a year later after the decision and everyone freaks out and they say, no, actually, nobody wanted this done, or at least the broad majority didn't. So what's the truth, Rich? Spill it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I tell people this all the time. The media, of course, they have the polls that they want to highlight and they don't. But outside of Gallup, I think we don't have the track record that Gallup has. But as far as the in-depth questions that we've asked on this issue and for the time period that we have, I think Gallup's the only one with a longer track record, Allison. And the fact is, both of us have shown that this is not the 1990s anymore. And that's the conversation that the media wants to have abortion in. They're like, made this little box and we're all supposed to stay in this box and pretend that pro-choice has a 15, 20 point, lead over pro-life. That's not true. Every month we poll it, they're always separated by a few points. It could be pro-life plus one month, pro-choice plus 3 the next. The truth is, people's views on abortions are really, on abortion in general, they're really complicated. And we wanted to ask, this is out. Yep, you just put it up. We wanted to ask last month about people's feelings on Roe v. Wade to show what we already knew was true because we've done this before, which is that people, it does depend how you ask the question, but generally speaking, people didn't know what Roe or Casey did. They just thought that it protected a fundamental right to have an abortion, but that doesn't mean that, that abortion restrictions are off limits altogether. And in truth, when we asked a lot of people that told us they were opposed to overturning Roe about whether they supported or opposed abortion within different trimesters or after different stages of development, the findings were really shocking, which you could see right here. I mean, 1 in 5 who told us they opposed overturning Roe still opposed abortions after a heartbeat had been detected. So that's a matter of weeks. That's in the first trimester. In the second question, that is the second trimester question. A third who said they opposed overturning Roe support restricting abortion in the second trimester or after doctors determine a baby can feel pain, which is, depending on the study, 20 to 20 weeks, right? Roughly in that ballpark. And then almost a majority who, again, claim they oppose overturning Roe. Almost a majority, 47%, just under. Opposed abortion in the and actually no, I think that's doctors determined babies can feel pain. It's 62% of people who opposed overturning Roe actually oppose abortion in the third trimester. So in the final 3 months of the pregnancy. So views are really complicated on this, and this goes back to, I hate to say it, but that it's not like I want to blame them for everything, but it is true. This goes to the media. This is the media's fault, because media lies a lot and they obscure a lot. Again, it's just not the 1990s anymore. Science has not been kind to abortion. And as people, we've gotten less religious over the course of 20 years. And you can see in that Gallup poll that abortion has become more acceptable morally than it's ever been. Yet younger people are more opposed to abortion during these stages of the pregnancy than they ever were 20 years ago or 30 years ago in the 90s. And that is because things have changed. But the media is still talking and politicians are still talking like we're in the 1990s and we're all supposed to view, a baby, 5 months, whatever, as a fetus, an unviable fetus. And the truth is people don't see it like that anymore. And there's a Biden voter in Dallas, in the suburbs outside of Dallas, that we had polled, and we asked her. She said she opposed overturning Roe. But then she told us that she opposed abortion after a heartbeat had been detected. And when we asked her, she basically said, look, this is the way I see it. When you die, the heart stopping is indicative of death. You're dead. When the heart beats, it should be indicative of life. And that's it. So while I do think that people should have the right to get an abortion early, if there's a reason, that what we define as early needs to change. And all these years I've been polling this guy, I've never heard somebody explain it to me like that. But she really, she said something that was kind of profound, right? We all associate the end of the end of your heart beating as the moment of death, or soon to be death. But we don't associate it with life, the start of heartbeat, it's life. We look at all these other factors, and she made that really clear cut for me. But that's just one view. Again, it really complex views, and it's never as simple as the media puts it. Never.
So before we go to guns, because that was the next poll I was going to show you, what do you think this exemplifies when it comes to how the corporate press does their polling, or maybe even other institutions do their polling versus the way you do it, that then ends up with results that don't necessarily reflect what the public is really thinking about? Like, how, I guess, can you just explain a little bit about how you go through your process to get something like, we were just looking at here, and how you ask questions that gets you a better perspective in your opinion and the opinion of many people who follow you, versus what, we're seeing, for instance. I mean, even Gallup, I guess they were pretty close. They were different than you, but then, definitely way different than what CNN is talking about
what
here.
you see
Broad
on
majority
CNN.
of Americans.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question, because there is a lot that can impact how, the results that you find when you're conducting polls. And number one is just basically how they ask the question, and then who they're asking the question to. So these different modes of collection, the media, the university polls, they're in love with the live caller, Allison. They're in love with it because it's a boys club. I mean, it essentially has been called the gold standard for years. It is not anymore. It was our least accurate method in 2020. We basically, if a client wants it, we'll do it if they're dying for it. But we have ways of doing it that is less expensive, which they hate, of course, they meaning the industry, but also more accurate. And the live caller skews and did and continues to skew heavily metro, a lot more moderate, a lot more liberal. Even younger. When you're trying to reach men, they're much more likely to pick up a live caller on a cell phone than somebody who's, working class and a different age. So, for instance, when you're looking at just the male gender, and you think, well, my sample's 47% male, that's roughly census balanced. I did a good job reaching that group. But if you're only reaching certain kinds of people within that overall demographic group, you're going to skew your results. So there's a lot that can tell us whether we do that or not. The media just refuses to admit it. And one of them is education, which they talk about sometimes. But another one is geography, which they don't give a lot of. They don't pay a lot of mind to. And really, it's never one or the other. As a pollster, a lot of people say it's, and it's true, that it's more of an art than a science, or at least it's more art than science. That's true. You just got to eventually know from, if you're doing things right, and you're right with elections, Allison, you got to trust how that your process is working better than others. But they just can't, they're unable to do this. And it's sad, because as we get, more into tech, it's only going to get worse for them. And you'll see it with guns. How they ask the question is also a major problem. And we did that poll like that to show people exactly that. People don't know what's in Roe. And anytime you use terminology that's in the media, you cause people to knee jerk and go right back to their respective camps. They're not going to give you their honest opinion or their most accurate response. So you have to try to avoid the media buzzwords, try to avoid political buzzwords, and just get to the crux of what you're asking. Do you support the bill that, Republicans in Texas rammed through the legislature that bans abortion after 16 weeks or whatever it may be? Or do you simply just ask them whether or not they support or oppose abortion after a heartbeat has been detected? I didn't associate that with Texas. which they may have heard about in the news. I didn't associate it with a Republican majority, which is going to cause some people to run for the hills. I just asked them the simple, plain question.
Yeah.
Big
Well,
difference.
you're so right, because I think people, even though they're being polled, people still freak out that it's somehow going to become public information. I answered this way on this question, and then people are going to
Yeah.
call me a, I don't know, anti-woman or whatever. What's the show, Handmaiden's Tale or whatever everyone talks about? I have to show you my
It's
video,
funny.
Rich, of in a second I will, of my little polling that I did, my non-professional polling when I went to a protest. I was the only one there. Nobody showed up, but they had been there the day before, and they wrote in chalk all their thoughts about it. And it'll well, I don't know, it may give you a different perspective on the level of thought that Americans have through these complex issues. Or maybe you won't be surprised at all, because you'll say, no, that's exactly what we found too. Okay, so let's switch over to guns. So couple, this comes after Roe v. Wade, so then everyone freaks out in the media again about this, that they struck down New York law that restricts concealed carrying of guns. And, there were a lot of quotes as normal from people who called, it reckless and reprehensible. This is governor of New York. And then another, this is an NYU, I guess, professor. This means that NRA and other gun rights adherents will have a do-over and can challenge and will challenge dozens and dozens of gun laws. So it's like it's going to be this slippery slope, and everybody's going to just have duels in the streets. And then
Aaron Burr and Hamilton
exactly.
and Burr.
And then Vox, polling is clear. Americans want gun control. So once again, here we have, here, and I think actually this is even before the decision. But polling is clear. Americans want gun control. Politicians diverge from voters when it comes to preventing gun deaths. So you have these rogue politicians who are just doing this when most people want more gun control. So talk to us about this issue.
Yeah, actually, that's not true. And if they use the word control in the poll, they will skew those results as well. So, and you'll see how the wording on gun issues, gun laws in polling is deeply deceptive and always has been for years. Another one, by the way, Gallup, who has done this for a long time, like us. If you say stricter gun laws, you'll get a different result than gun control, saying gun control. But this is what we've generally found. It's actually pretty split when there's not an event. And so Uvalde, Buffalo, this latest one, if there's not an event, it's actually pretty close. But what's not close is whether you ask Americans whether or not they believe stricter gun laws will solve the problem or will address the issue of mass shooting and gun violence. And the answer to that is overwhelmingly no. They do not believe it will help. So they just kind of pry on the news cycle, temporary increase in support for gun control measures after the news cycle constantly covers, recklessly, by the way, these events. And I always tell people that there's only downside for the right to act on these gun laws. Number one, first and foremost, because none of them are going to work. And that's nothing that they actually propose does anything to deal with the problem that we have that's leading to mass shooting, violence, or even gun violence in general. That's number one. So I don't know why you would react to do something that could politically hurt you if you know full well you're only doing it to appease the political animals. You're not doing it because it's a solution to the problem. But putting all that aside, because they're politicians and they're never that smart, the second reason why they shouldn't act on it is because that temporary increase we see every time there's a shooting is driven by the voter who's kind of in the middle and doesn't vote on guns anyway. They will never vote. They will never cast their ballot in November because Republicans didn't pass an assault rifle ban or whatever word we're using today. They don't care about that. I mean, they temporarily will answer a pollster. In 2 weeks from now, a month from now, if there are no mass shootings, their support will go down for stricter gun laws, and you'll just be left with people who absolutely hate the Second Amendment and people who absolutely love the Second Amendment. So if you're a Republican, you would be stupid to pass any of these laws because all you will do is risk turning off your own base and depressing them come the election. And we're starting to hear some of that now because of what passed in Congress. The, I don't know if I'm going to vote. What's the point? They're all the same, apparently. They're all the same. Once you start to hear things like that from a party base, that party has problems. And that is what we saw after this gun bill. Same thing this week. It's abortion. That, this chunk of voters who are saying that their number one issue is abortion. Last week or 2 weeks ago, that was gun control. A month before that, it was Ukraine. We have to stop Vladimir Putin. We call them the news cycle Democrat because they tend to be more Democrat than anything else. And they just, most people in the country are focused on inflation and economic issues. They're not focused on the news cycle. They don't get distracted easily, but you're seeing this fluctuation. They drive those numbers. That and poor wording. And I'll tell you, if you give people a choice when it comes to school shootings specifically or any other event shootings, when you give them a choice, Allison, would you rather see this, approach with mental health reform or something like that? Or would you rather stricter gun laws? People will overwhelmingly tell you, that they don't want stricter gun laws if we can address the mental health issue. So it's a bit of a game media have been playing, and they've been doing that for years, by the way, years.
How has it, if you have done any polling on this, how do people answer that they would fix the problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most people think that we have, and I think they're right. Most people think that we have really serious mental health issues in this country, like on a mass level. So security is the best way to go. So when we give them different options on what should we do, what do you think could fix this problem? Until we address the core issue, is that problem with young men feeling ostracized. We've culturally castrated men in society. And, we have a problem with the family unit. I mean, all of this is not only probably right to be, but viewed to be the root cause of some of our bigger issues. And until we get them under control, protecting potential victims is the best way to go. So people would rather you put in, worry about point of entry and put in detectors and other, and scanners in schools rather than, restrict more guns. Because in the end, especially in the case with Buffalo, I mean, he specifically cited that target because he knew it would be a soft target. It would be an easy target in that area. Doesn't have I don't even want to call him liberal, but doesn't have lax gun carrying policies. So, I mean, even in his own manifesto, he thought that it would be safer. He'd be able to do more damage until somebody stopped him, which is tragic. But a lot of people are smart. They're smarter than the media gives them credit for. And they do see this as more of a security issue.
Right. Well, and I think I just had a guy on a couple days ago, last week, I guess, who is of the sort of, I think when I talk to people, there's kind of two groups when it comes to how much information or how should you get the information out to Americans and like what can they handle. And one group's like, Americans just can't handle it. So you just really need to get your message honed in and just don't give them all the information. Just, only the stuff that they can handle. Because they just, you'll overwhelm them and then you'll end up getting bad results with public behavior. The other side's like, no, they may know a lot more than even you do. And these sort of, higher up positions or in the media, and you should just give them the information. And yeah, some people, maybe a lot of people, won't care or won't necessarily understand it, but at least it's there for them if they want it. And then there are a lot of people who will parse through it and try to figure it out. And so I think depending on where you fall in those, you tend to be more like pro censorship versus pro sort of just, the Wild West of the internet, which I am, because I would just prefer there to be, people who either just don't care or get it wrong sometimes versus centralized control over that information or the polling data or whatever it is. But I think I don't know if it's a personality thing or I haven't really been able to figure it out totally yet, but I just noticed those kind of two camps, the people who think, no, like somehow I'm in a better position to explain it to you. And there are a few of us who are, so we should just really keep it to us. And then, trickle down knowledge, I guess, trickle down knowledge economics of some kind.
The Hamilton
the other
view.
kind, right?
The Hamilton view, rich and well-born,
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's why That's why certain people in modern America love Hamilton, because that was the way he thought. I generally, Allison, on an issue like guns in general, Second Amendment, if you're campaigning, you always want to keep your message sharp. You don't want to overload people, but that's like a political campaign. You're trying to win an election.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem some people have, and the left is very good at not doing this, is they take their foot off the gas. And over time, you should constantly be getting out your information in a more comprehensive package, because people are smart enough to understand it. They may just, if it's a campaign, like a branding or messaging campaign over the long term, you may want to tier it so people can have more time to digest it. But I still am in the camp of they are capable of doing it. They just aren't given the correct information. And again, I'm going to go and throw the media under the bus here with this. Unfortunately, we're having a debate, an issue like guns, when one side really has no idea what they're talking about. When it comes to guns, they know what they're told. They constantly believe these media and political created myths. The gun show loopholes, things like this, as if these things are widely prevalent. I would dare you to go to a gun show in Florida and attempt to purchase a handgun and walk away. It's not going to happen. That's unless, of course, you have a concealed weapons permit, which means you already went through the rigorous process anyway. But there's just so many people who don't really know. I mean, they think it's probably, if we polled it, there's probably 40%, at least in this country, who think AR stands for assault rifle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure there is. The side who's pro-gun is, and I'm going to take some crap for this, but it's true. The side that's pro-gun knows more about firearms and gun safety in general. The side that is not has no clue. And I could be, and you know what? I believe that as someone who lived in many different areas of the country, where some guns are not very accepted in society, versus where guns are culture. And there's a level of reverence and a level of knowledge about it among others that is just not shared everywhere. I'm trying to be nice here, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, no, one thing I've found living all over the country as a reporter was that depending on where you lived, whoever had the sort of minority view, I guess, politically, tended to be more well-versed in their argument because they were more regularly faced with opposition. And so if you have a media that tends to lean pro-gun control, the folks who are trying to preserve gun rights are likely going to be more educated about, besides the fact that they just have guns, right? So they're going to be more educated about it because they engage in it. They're more likely to understand the arguments in favor of the Second Amendment or gun rights because the intellectual sort of majority, I guess, the louder majority, is in the opposite direction. So they sort of have to have like their game together. I've noticed that like atheists in Seattle were pretty dumb because there were just so many of them. Whereas if maybe you went to Alabama, maybe
Right.
you'd find smarter atheists because a lot of people are not atheists. There would be sort of a more biblical, I guess, conservative Christian culture. So you're like, well, I better be a smart. Boston was kind of the same way. I went to seminary in Boston, and it was just interesting to see how if sort of the culture around you tends to lean the opposite direction, you tend to be more on your game when it comes to your arguments. And I think probably that's why you could just be lazier if you get away with just saying the stupid things that you were just mentioning that people get wrong all the time. You get away with it because hardly anybody calls you on it if that's sort of the majority narrative. But on the opposite side, you keep your you keep your talking points clear and concise, and you know what you're discussing because there's much more opposition. Like you will get called on something if you get it wrong, because you don't hold sort of the popular narrative, I guess, when it comes to the corporate media. One question I had about guns too, if you had looked into, is one thing my husband talks about a lot is this idea that, you get rid of these bigger, like the longer guns and, then, okay, it'll reduce casualties, but he brings up like how many pistols you could put in your pocket and get into
That's right.
location and how many people you could, kill that way actually, and you could conceal far more weapons. Did people talk, would you poll about that, about like gun size, I guess, and when you, the, I guess, perceptions people have about reducing casualties and that issue?
Yeah, we have talked about capacity before,
Uh,
magazine capacity. Funny, interesting as it is, most people don't, even though the media is constantly harping about AR, AR, AR. It's all you hear about. People do understand that most violence is committed with handguns. They've correctly identified that to us before, which was surprising to me. I thought that they wouldn't. They would say rifles or weapons of war, whatever term the media is using this week. But in fact, they did accurately say that. And, it's interesting because we had a big push. The reason why we did magazine capacity is because we had a big push under the Obama administration. And then for a second there, under President Trump as well, the Trump administration, to ban certain rounds. So, 10 rounds and above is outlawed. People really didn't see. I think we were just getting too in the weeds. It's just not an issue that many people really understood. I think people told us, yes, they would favor that. They did. But I was thinking that's probably one of those instances, Allison, where a poll is being conducted and the respondent on the other end kind of thinks they know what the right answer is supposed to be, or at least the answer that you want. I don't, maybe
yeah.
not the right answer is not the great, but how am I supposed to answer this question? And if
Right.
they don't know enough about it, they'll just kind of defer to that instinct. And
Yeah.
by the way, what you were saying before is kind of funny. It's like the little guy on the playground, right? He's always the scrappiest in school. The little guy's always the one you got to watch out for because he's always little. He's always got to fight. All the big guys have to walk around,
Right.
and they just have to, they get away with it. They never
Yeah.
actually have to throw a punch or take one, right?
It's
like
like,
an
yeah, it's like the
intellectual
little dog
Darwinism.
complex, like the Jack Russell Terriers and the Chihuahuas.
Yeah.
Those dogs can be nasty. You gotta
Yeah. Little poodles.
yeah. So, yeah, Malteses. Like, I never go
A
up to
little
an old
vicious.
lady holding a Chihuahua or a Maltese. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway, um, okay. Well, I'm
Lose a
sure that if
finger.
you told people about AllisonWinePromo.com, it would be 100% everybody is on board with AllisonWinePromo.com. So everybody go support my channel. You get 50% off some amazing Malbecs from Argentina and 50% off shipping. These are high altitude. There is one from almost 9,000 feet, and it's a very robust, unique flavor. All of these are from very
It's
remote
delicious.
places.
It's
The Rogue
delicious.
Malbec, kind of like Rich. So, and a lot of people who come on the channel. So go to AllisonWinePromo.com, support my work, get some great wine for whatever the next holiday is. What is the next holiday, Rich? Do you know?
Labor Day.
Labor Day. Okay.
That's
So get
right.
it. Yeah, get it now while you can. Before all the food shortages and everything. It may be all you have left at some point is to just get some AllisonWinePromo.com. But you can also get coffee at twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. And these are high altitude Nicaraguan roasts, USDA certified organic. There's a wide variety of them. There is a limited edition, black edition here. I'm actually drinking right now cigar number 1. I don't know if you smoke cigars, but anyway, allegedly it pairs. The guy who started this company was a cigar aficionado, and he has coffee specifically paired because he lived in Cuba and he wrote about cigars for years. And anyway, but I don't smoke cigars. But I do drink cigar number 1. So anyway, it's a very good dark roast. Or if you like tea, you can get Katura tea, which is tea made from the coffee fruit. It's very good. I cold brew mine for 24 hours. It's a lot like black tea, but you can do it with the hot tea as well. Okay. So Rich, there were a couple comments that I wanted to read. StreamYard is kind of screwing me right now, so I can't put them on the screen, but I like the strategy of what would your neighbor answer, and Rich Baris, the most accurate and best pollster in the last decade, combined with the personality, the greatest pollster of all time. So just wanted to make sure you knew people were sending you
Wow.
love.
Right back at you. Mwah, that's a good one. I love that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, that's always really interesting tactic to help identify social bias, different social biases. What would your neighbor do? How do you think your neighbor's going to vote? What do you think your neighbor would say about this? It kind of gets people, Allison, to tell you what they really think without those social pressures, because they're real. And people who follow the Public Polling Project, they know that those social pressures are serious, especially in modern America. Thought that maybe they would subside a little after, after the media didn't have the former president to use to really increase them. Unfortunately, they have not. In fact, in some places, they've gotten worse. So some pollsters would blame the former president for how badly they were doing. It's Trump's fault. He makes us all, people don't like us because the former president mocks us, so they don't take polls or they take them incorrectly. That's obviously was never true. The problem was before the former president, and it's just gotten worse because we're living in a different time. Not everybody has a landline anymore, Allison. It's a different world.
We don't have one. A lot of
Me
people don't
either.
even, they're cord cutters with the TV too. So, and don't even, I mean, we've cut a lot of cords. Since you brought up Trump, as delicately as you can, since we are on YouTube, somebody on Locals, I'll go over there in a second so I can get a couple last questions before you go, asked about the interest in election integrity that your polls have found. How high does it rank, I guess, on people's concerns leading into upcoming elections?
It's definitely an economic election, but this is why we do rank distribution. There are different things that people could call it, but it's like it's almost like ranked choice voting. So we'll ask people in a multiple response question format with only one response allowed. What is your most important issue? When we do that, election integrity is, maybe 6 to 8% usually in any given poll. It may be even a little less in some national polls, but in the districts, in the battleground districts we're polling now for the House, it's ballpark 6 to 8, maybe 10 in some districts where it's higher. Where it really shines is when you ask people to rank from most important to least important. What is your most important voting issues? And then you'll see something like cost of living, inflation will stay number one, economic issues. But then in those second to third and fourth tiers, you'll see things that may have scored number 8, Allison, in the initial question. It's not close to the top 3. You'll see them in the top, 3, 4, even sometimes 2 spots, like crime, and election integrity is another one. Abortion is coming up, and word on that, by the way, it doesn't have, I don't think it'll have the staying power, and it's not only pro-abortion voters who are choosing it. So a lot of people, when they see some of these polls, they think, well, look, abortion is rising. Quite, it's a little bit surprised. One of the polls we're doing right now, it's in a Rust Belt district. Slightly more people who chose abortion were actually pro-life. So I think that maybe they feel like this ruling could come under assault from maybe a congressional, legislation that Congress could pass. So it matters to them as well. But they're not giving up that interest in election integrity, which matters more to the Republican voter than it does the Democratic voter. When we give that choice, we always ask them, is it election integrity or election reform? Because if you ask Democrats, you have to ask them differently. So we'll always say election integrity / reform, and then we'll ask them which one, what does it mean to them, to see where they fall down on that issue. Because to Democrats, folks, it means HR 1. To Republicans, it means, I'm trying to be careful, it means something else. It means integrity,
Right.
All right.
Which is interesting too, because both parties have clamored about theft. I'm trying to say it in a way that the AI is not going to pick up, but an influence. So it's not like it's just relegated. It just depends on who benefited from it. Then then you get different responses from different people. This was something that somebody on Locals posted about Rasmussen, for what they're saying people are concerned about, Americans are concerned about, versus media top concerns. So people, they have inflation, then election integrity, violent crime, rising gas prices, illegal immigration, school issues. And then for media, abortion rights, Capitol riot investigation, COVID-19, climate change, LGBTQ issues, and Ukraine. And it's interesting. So, I'm guessing we've already talked about the media, but it still seems like, even if that's true, I don't know how they put this together, but if it's true, it seems like even when the media beats a drum, that Americans still can't have the, are still going in opposite directions in a lot of ways. Like that they're not necessarily totally reflexive to whatever they're seeing or reading. That like to go back to what you were saying, that people, if you give them information, they can rise to the opportunity and chance to think for themselves, because they're not just mirroring the same concerns, right? I mean, that's what my takeaway is here anyway, but also that the media is like totally disconnected from people's concerns. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before I go to another question somebody had for you.
Yeah, that's just a different format on how they ask it, which is neat. We always like the rank because we always want to know about priority. What's your voting issue? What issue is going to get you to swing one way or the other, or multiple, right? So it's a neat format, and I appreciate the way they do that because it offers a different element. But yeah, going to how the media, I think they can kind of steer the conversation, Allison, but it doesn't mean it will sell. And what the media is not understanding right now in the January 6 commission is not understanding right now, all these attempts to distract, is that if you're an average American, you can't be distracted right now. You're hurting. You have serious concerns about whether or not your paycheck is going to suffice for at the grocery store and the gas pump. So they want you. It's like they want you to defy Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They want you to like forget that exists or something. So worry about something in the middle tier, even though you don't have your basic needs met. And I think that's what's driving the former president's, potential comeback polls. The chance that Trump could pull like a Grover Cleveland, because people are now looking back. I think under him, they had the luxury to care about some of these things. With the media, you're not decent. That was the argument. You're not decent if you still, vote Republican or vote for Donald Trump. And that mattered to some people because things were okay. Their economic needs were met. Their basic needs were met. Housing, shelter, food, transportation, their basic needs, they didn't have a problem fulfilling them. Now, when you have that kind of a problem, it's harder to distract people because they have to deal with it every day, right? They got to go to the gas pump. They have to pay a bill. The grocery store.
Don't get me started.
Yep.
We just filled up our truck. It was $175. I almost passed out.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Never going anywhere.
And I have points at the grocery store too, Allison. And I still almost spent $100 to fill up my I have in a Ascent. It's not a truck, it's not huge. But yeah, I remember just 3 years ago, it cost, I don't know, maybe $40 tops. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know.
Or like remember at the beginning of COVID when it was like $1.25 a gallon. Remember that?
Yeah,
Those were the good
nothing.
days.
Yeah.
Okay, here are a couple. Have there been any polling on these three topics? Ways to punish government other than voting them out. Oh, that brings me to the other one I wanted to show you. I'll save that for a second.
I was just gonna that reminded me of that. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so I'll bring that up while you're talking about separation of press and state. And has Rich conducted any polling on constitutional purchase of firearms? Purchasing as unregulated as buying pencils.
We actually, for number 3, I'll go backward. We have done that. It wasn't popular. It wasn't popular nationally. Maybe I think it was 39% supported it, 52 opposed it, but they were okay with letting states do it. So if a state says you have a constitutional right, and this should not be regulated at all. Arizona's open carry now, so if Arizona wants to do that, that's fine. Arizona has the right to do it. It's their state, and if you don't like them, you can deal with them at their state legislator level. But they weren't okay with doing that blanket across the country. They weren't, not yet. What was the second one? The second one was, going to punish.
On this topic, I wanted to bring this up because we were talking about what could you punish? How could you punish the government? Have you pulled on that versus just voting them out? Are there any other ways? And it just reminded me that this was going around that a survey of 1,000 registered U.S. voters reveals the most Americans agree government is corrupt and rigged, and a quarter of Americans are open to taking up arms against the government. Um, so here, let's see if I can open this and look who did it. University of Chicago. Okay, so extreme polarization and alienation in our politics. And the data suggests that extreme polarization in U.S. politics remains strong. And the survey indicates distrust in government varies among party lines. 56% of participants said they generally trust elections to be conducted fairly and counted accurately. Republicans, Democrats, and independents were dramatically split on this point. Nearly 80% of Democrats voiced overall trust. That number dipped to 51% among independents and 33% from Republicans. We talked a little bit about that. Of the 28% of voters who felt it might soon be necessary to take up arms against the government, 37% had guns in their homes, according to the data. So it's funny because it's like a quarter and then not even like all of them. So it's, I don't know. I think it's funny, these headlines too. Sometimes it's like, they just want you to think, like I said, people are going to start dueling it out in the streets. And yeah, it's going to go back to like this 1800s or 1700s. So any thoughts on this one?
You know, we have done a lot on the idea of a break, you know, and how much faith we've lost in institutions. We do that annually. It's something that concerns me, actually, because we actually found we asked a little different questions, but it painted an even less rosier picture than what's shown there. Although that poll too also identified the media as a major source of our division and our problem, which I believe is absolutely correct. I think they're probably the most negative force in the country, and they are the greatest force for division because they lie. They lie so much, and the point of lying is usually to pit one group against another. So they're pushing us closer toward this. This next public polling project that we're doing will be the annual to ask these questions again. So it would be fresh. But last year, we asked people how likely it was that they believe the United States could resolve its differences peacefully, or would it be politically would it be an upheaval, a violent upheaval, or a second civil war? And ironically, Allison, it was really scary. I mean, 30% thought it was somewhat likely we would head for another civil war. Very likely was 10%. And the worst part about it is there was a large chunk on both sides that did not favor peaceful resolution. They wanted to just fight, which is, to me, when you have 35% of each political party saying, you know what, I don't even care if we can reach a peaceful resolution. I'd rather just fight and let's do this. When you have, the estimates for the Revolutionary War was only, low end 25, high end a third of the population that fueled that rebellion. Mm-hmm. And here we have numbers like this that actually prefer fighting. I mean, that's a little bit scary to me. It honestly is. But that's it's real, and we've seen it.
Well, as you brought up the media,
it looks like younger. Oh, go ahead,
Rich.
I was just going to say younger Democratic men tend to be the most, I want to be careful here, but tend to be the most willing to have acts of violence against leaders. So if they feel that the system is rigged to the point where they can't change it, they're the most likely to say, well, then that leaves only one option, right? And so one of the things that does concern me as someone who looks at public opinion is this growing feeling from both sides, because even in that poll you saw a majority of liberals thought that the government was corrupt and rigged. Mm-hmm. When you have that many people, Allison, coming to the conclusion that the system is broken, doesn't work, I have no other recourse, then you have real instability, potential for instability. Mm-hmm. So that's something that does actually keep me up at night. Sometimes does.
This half of Americans say they have friends or relatives who have changed because of the media they consume. That was kind of what you were bringing up, that the influence of the media.
Yeah. The media is the most destructive force in the country. And again, we did some work for jury selection in some high profile cases. And the country always latches on. You have somebody who's pro-Depp, right? Somebody who's pro-Amber Heard, or in the case of Rittenhouse, you're pro-guilty, you're pro-innocent, and on and on. And we've worked on a lot of these national cases. And it really does matter which news outlets you consume or how you get your information. Really does matter and where you stand on these issues, but also how accurately you can identify facts in these different events and cases. And I'm coming to the conclusion that they do this on purpose. They sow this, these demonstrably false ideas or claims, and that things that never happened or things that don't exist. I'm starting to believe they do it on purpose, not even starting. I do believe they do it on purpose just to gin people up and anger them, which is a shame, because then you have, like something like illusory truth effect. Once you get them to believe the lie or the conspiracy, whatever it is, they will never, or not, well, not always, but it's difficult to break someone's belief in something, even when it's not true, and they're presented with evidence of it not being true. It's called illusory truth effect. Other people that are educated, otherwise smart, it doesn't matter whether you're ignorant, or whether you're somebody who's smart. It happens to everybody. So the danger in them doing this is very real, because especially when we're in a hyper-partisan environment, it's already difficult enough to get the human brain to admit to itself that it's been lied to, and that it believes that lie. And when you add all of this to it, it's like it's a powder keg. It's a powder keg. It's so irresponsible and narrow, or short-sighted, not even narrow-minded, short-sighted of them to do, because it gives them a short-term benefit, but they're not really putting a lot of thought into what can happen down the road when they eventually push this a little too far, which I think they could do.
And it's always interesting to me, too, that when it comes to calls for whose voices need to be silenced because of the damage it's doing, it's never them. It's always the YouTuber or the person on Rumble or BitChute or whatever, and they never look to themselves and say, maybe we're dangerous. Maybe we spread disinformation and sow strife among Americans. It just seems like they even when they do stories about each other retracting or correcting their, like the USA Today report. Remember, they like just completely scrapped 23 or something articles because the reporter, they said, just fabricated quotes and all that stuff. But they don't. So they'll tell you about it. They'll tell you about it, but then they never say, lately the U.S. media, corporate media, has really been spewing a lot of disinformation, and there are calls now from this UC Berkeley professor that they should be shut down, and then roll the cue from the UC oh yes, it's very dangerous, the corporate news. But they do that to the YouTuber like Rich Baris. He just, he goes on and says all this crazy stuff, and with his 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, he needs to be shut down. He's really turning his country into a mess. It's so crazy.
Nobody went after Rachel Maddow or Hillary Clinton or Brian Stelter or any of those guys at CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. The man, the individual who shot up the Republican baseball game practice for the congressional charity game, fully believed 100%. He believed everything Rachel Maddow said. Donald Trump was a traitor who is bought up by Vladimir Putin, and he believed that Republican lawmakers were his enablers, and he held them responsible for not removing the traitor from the White House. Between that and the ridiculous reporting about what would happen to people if Obamacare was repealed and replaced, this guy believed he was a hero. He wasn't a madman who was going to shoot up elected leaders. He was the hero in his story, because Rachel Maddow and others pushed him to believe a conspiracy theory that was not, and yet nobody ever brings that up. Like you said, it's never Rachel Maddow or some crackpot on MSNBC who's been wrong every night this week for the last how many years. It's never them. It's a YouTuber. Yeah. Or not them, the other, right? The other.
Okay, any quick thoughts on what is Biden's real approval rating? Corporate media admitting 38%. They tend to rate the DNC higher than reality. And have you done a poll on if DeSantis could beat Trump in 2024?
So I would say yes to both. I can answer both of those. One is with Biden's approval rating. If you want to know what the Real Clear Politics average is going to say 2 weeks or a month from now, then just follow the Public Polling Project and peoplespundit.locals.com, because they lag us by 2 weeks to a month. Now we have him at 38, 37. People who follow our polling, we were at 37 last month. We'll find out what he's going to be this month. I do think we're just in a very different, period. Biden needs to lose some more of his progressive wing of the party in order to really collapse. But I do think Biden could go into the low 30s pretty easily, actually, because he's starting there are cracks in the Democratic base. Disapproval is close to 20, almost 20% in our last poll, especially among African-American men. He has real problems. So I will see what it is when we do this new poll, but we had it at 37 last month before everyone else dove into the mid to high 30s. And then the second one on this, guys, is I think a lot of people who are interested in politics don't remember that not everybody may know who Ron DeSantis is. So we have done some polling that we did not release publicly because I told people this would be unfair at this point. It's really just a name recognition race. I at this point don't think Ron DeSantis can beat Donald Trump in a nomination. Donald Trump is he's got a base, guys, who loves him. And it's going to be very, very difficult, barring some kind of an indictment or something that takes Trump out, whether he does it himself or it comes from an outside force. With the reason why we continue to poll Trump against Biden and other Democrats is because nobody else really has meaningful name recognition. And you pit Trump up against DeSantis and he gets clobbered right now. So, or DeSantis gets clobbered. It's just not, I was thinking, Allison, of doing it just to show them, because we have so many people who are like, why do they love DeSantis? Why do you only poll about Trump? They don't understand that against Joe Biden, DeSantis got killed by 9 points because nobody knew who he was nationally. He got 12% in a Republican nomination and Trump was at 58. I mean, so do you want me to release those numbers publicly to hurt your boy? I know you get him and you love him. I think it's unfair to him to do it at this point. So I'm waiting. But people love him, people who love him, and they feel like you're like leaving them out of the party or something on purpose. We're not. We're trying to be fair. And nationally, it doesn't look good for him. Not yet. But it could. It absolutely could. It'll be a second-term governor of the largest battleground state in the country. People will know. But most people right now are just trying to put gas in their car, guys. They're not looking for potential Republican presidential nominees in 2024. We are, because we love politics and we live this stuff. We breathe it. We eat, sleep, and every single day. They don't. They're just trying to get through their lives and survive.
Have you polled on Carrie Lake, the former TV anchor who's running for governor in Arizona?
Yeah, they're trying to Doug Mastriano her, basically rally against her.
What does that mean?
Toward the end, everyone thought Doug Mastriano was a general election disaster waiting to happen in Pennsylvania. So they basically rallied behind Lou Barletta at the last minute, but it was too late. And I think with Carrie Lake, she probably has a lead. CD Media, Todd Wood, the guys, L. Todd Wood over at CD Media, they were supposed to commission us to do that. So I kind of left Arizona open for them because we had talked about doing it. We're coming down to the wire, though. So if they're going to do it soon, I imagine they'll pull the trigger on it soon. Arizona's a tricky state to poll. So, I'm always skeptical of other people's stuff. But I will say this. I do think Carrie Lake is probably ahead. And honestly, some of the polls that I do trust that were really internal work that I did see had her actually as the strongest Republican candidate in the general election, which was a little bit surprising to me. But she was. And then Blake Masters, I do think he's ahead as well. But I really do hope to get into that state. I love polling Arizona, and we're coming down to the wire. It's really, it's almost crunch time. So I hope we get a chance to do it. Which I think we will.
Liz Cheney?
Liz Cheney is in deep trouble. She bet everything on getting Democrats and leaning independents to vote for her. But the problem is statewide. Her favorability rating was in the 20s in the last poll that I know somebody who did. It's not just that she can get the Democrats out to help her. Hag has a huge lead. And the state legislature tried, it was her effort, by the way. They tried to make a runoff law, put that in place before Liz Cheney's election, which basically would have given her the opportunity to run again, to get, run it another run up. If her challenger didn't get 50% or more, now that was defeated because she's not politically strong. So her bill went down. Like we were calling it the Save Liz bill. It went down because she didn't even have enough political muscle in her own state's legislature to get that through. She's in deep trouble. She is. It's just, she'll probably lose, Allison, and a year or two from now, she'll be a Democrat. She won't even continue with the charade.
I have a friend who's from Wyoming, and I'm like, I don't understand. I thought Wyoming would be the opposite place where a Liz Cheney would succeed. And so I guess you're confirming for me that she's not really succeeding in Wyoming. Just seems very odd.
She got in there on her daddy's name.
End up switching.
Yeah, she got in there on her daddy's name and, the goodwill from being a Cheney. And she did not govern as the person that she claimed to be all of these years. And, her gamble was that she would, stake her name as a maverick, like a John McCain maverick. I don't always go with my party. But the truth is, it is not the Republican Party that her dad was the vice president in anymore. So, the warmongering, the huge and reckless spending on defense when we're having inflationary issues, constantly joining with Democrats on whether it's gun bills or whatever it is. Her gamble was to get Democrats to vote for her and try to save her from the Trump Republican candidate. And it's just not working. It's not working. So she threw everything away. I mean, this is a woman who really portrayed herself as a pretty conservative woman for many years. So when you do that, ask Charlie Crist in Florida, nobody really ends up rewarding you for it. This is the problem these people have. They never understand this when they come up with these political strategies. Charlie Crist thought that the country, and Florida along with it, was becoming more Hispanic, which would mean more Democratic. He completely miscalculated. He went from being one of the most conservative governors, let alone in Florida, period. He was governing as a popular Republican, definitely to the right governor. And then you just wake up one day and turn that off, Allison, and end up somebody who's totally different. It's not like he was a governor when he was 19 and he's got different views now that he's 40. This is a middle-aged man growing into,
too many hours in the tanning bed. I think he was in a tanning bed too long.
That's we call him Charlie Crisp.
Yeah, Charlie Crisp. I'm from Florida, so I mean, I remember watching that guy just get browner and wrinklier like every day.
But they loved him until he flip-flopped, and now he has no home. He lost to Rick Scott, and Democrats don't particularly like him either. When you flip-flop like that, people never really know who to trust. Which one of you should I trust? The establishment, yet still kind of rhino-y conservative from Wyoming, or this new very liberal Liz Cheney. It's the same thing that happened with Krispy Kreme in Florida, and he went nowhere. And after a defeat, which I believe she's headed for, then it's over for her. It's over. Lights are out. She'll be a Democrat and an MSNBC commentator. Watch.
Yeah.
Mark my words.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure she'll fail up. No problems there. While the rest of us can afford to pay our bills. Okay. That's right. These were the only other questions that were left that I asked earlier. I don't remember if you wanted or felt like you wanted to answer any more of them. I think we talked about separation of press and state. Maybe we did that, or the government. We did punish the government. What about this constitutional purchase of firearms unregulated as buying pencils? I think maybe that was the last one, or did you already?
Yeah, we did. We did do that, but I can repeat it.
No, it's okay. You don't need to.
Yeah, just okay.
If you feel like you covered
the second one, I think I missed. I think clearly
the second one, press and state. Okay.
The distinction between any government and press in the Constitution. Yeah, I mean, it's funny if you look at the history, and you Allison, this probably better than me, but you look at the history of journalism in this country. We did always have this like charade where they're supposed to be impartial and they're not really, but we look at them as an authority and police of power. For many years in this country, we had a very political press, but the difference was people understood it was political. People understood that they were coming at it from the Jeffersonian Republican side of the equation, or they were coming at it from the Federalist side. It wasn't a scam, which is like this insulting of your intelligence to act as if I'm an impartial arbiter of the truth, when in fact I have an agenda. I think that's what, I don't know, not new, but more extreme than it used to be. It's, I'm not a lawyer, but I think there's probably maybe something Barnes is better equipped to answer. I would worry about ramifications to codifying some kind of protection for that. But yeah, I mean, you have freedom of the press in the First Amendment. I mean, they could just do what they want. I think the problem's on us, Allison, really do, that we are kidding ourselves. We look at USA Today's fact check and think that they're supposedly they're somehow trustworthy. And the fact check about Hillary Clinton and abortion is still on there, still there. We go back and do that all the time. That Hillary Clinton and Democrats don't support late-term abortion.
Oh,
it's up there, right? Because Donald Trump had turned to her in the debate. You're such a nasty woman, he said. But he's like, look, Hillary, you want to rip babies out of the womb. He said it so horribly that everybody in the audience was like, oh, but he did it to paint a picture of what this issue means if it's not restricted. Immediately, PolitiFact, USA Today, they all jumped out. Oh, that's false. That is false. It's not false, obviously. So I think the joke's kind of on us if we don't look at media as, the same thing as a pollster, by the way. I do this all the time. Don't let pollsters trick you into thinking, why? Because they work at Monmouth University or another university, Suffolk, whatever it is, that they're not human beings who have their own views. The trick is to keep those views out of the work. And I think you have to be more skeptical towards outlets and institutions. Everyone has an agenda. I think the joke's on us, really. If we allow that.
I mean, that's totally true. I think, I hope anyway, that I know it can go in sort of a detrimental direction with just massive distrust everywhere of everything. Like, you're even looking at the lady who's helping you check out at the grocery store, and you're like, are you CIA? Are you following me? Like, I just want to know. But I hope that the positive is that, I mean, we're moving into an era of taking a little bit more intellectual responsibility for the things that come out of our mouth, or the way, the systems we participate in, and not just accepting because it's there, it's allowed by the government, or it's pushed by the government, or somebody else, that it's been vetted, or that it doesn't have some kind of propaganda aspect to it, or it's not pushing us in a direction that may be bad for everybody. I mean, it sounds so stupid, but I never had a manager, not a single time that I can remember in 12 or 13 years of reporting, really sit all of us down and say, okay, everybody, we need to remember that we should be on alert for all these special interests that are constantly trying to use us as their mouthpieces, question everything. There's an agenda everywhere. The press releases that seem really mundane and it's not a big deal from the hospital or whoever else. Let's look into it. The Department of Health has their own agenda, so don't just accept they're here to just make sure the public's okay. Never one single time did I have a manager, really sit down and like tell us, or, even once, much less, I feel like every editorial meeting should have started that way. So there's just a lack of critical thinking. I don't really have hope, just knowing some of the folks that are still in the business, who are still my friends. I don't necessarily have hope that they're going to be moving. Some of them, I think maybe, but most of them, I think, are still kind of headstrong, that the public's the rogue, wacko extremist, and they have to dig in even more to protect you and silence the opposing voices that could lead you astray, that they have even more responsibility to babysit you. But I think, I don't know, I'm hoping that we come out of this a little bit more balanced on just who we sort of, like you said, trust, and like how much responsibility we'll take for ourselves to sort of really sift through stuff, even if at all that means is you don't just cancel grandma for Thanksgiving because she voted for somebody different. I feel like we went through these years of, that's what makes me the saddest is to see how my industry has just ruined relationships, just flat out ruined relationships, ruined communities, and people who like don't talk anymore, friends. Like one of my friends was telling me related to COVID policy, she got disinvited as a bridesmaid. Her friend from 20 years won't talk to her anymore. I mean, this for information that comes out of these highly propagandist institutions, friends are not talking to each other, family members are not having dinner together anymore. To me, that's really the saddest part of it all. So I don't know if you have any final words before we go, but I really appreciate it, Rich.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced that in some way, some form or another. It's just why we ask those series of questions on the national polling that we do, and we do it in a lot of districts and state as well. Like basically asking people, do you feel, are you comfortable sharing your political beliefs with each different group, such as how you intend to vote or feel about an issue? And we'll say family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, strangers, and pollsters like me, right? Then the answers are sad, and everyone knows it because I think we've all seen it. It's happened in my family, and especially with what I do. There are people who don't vehemently do not agree with me, and so it's tragic. So and that's fine. But I think the difference is years ago we never agreed on certain issues. We just used to have a little something called debate, and that was all right. And then we moved on, but you were still my whatever, my cousin, my brother, my whatever, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, whatever it may be. Now there's this intolerance of that, and the media continues to push that. They do, and that's like it's okay or something. And it's like the generation, Allison, who if you didn't give them 5 strikes on the block playing baseball, if you didn't give them 5 strikes or 6 strikes, they would take their bat and run home and spoil the whole game. It's like that generation grew up, and now they're in different positions of power, and it's tragic. It's totally tragic, but that's where we're at, and we have to deal with it.
Yep. Well, Rich, is there anything else people should know? I mean, peoplespundit.locals.com, right? Anything else where people should follow you or what you are working on in the future? Anything you want to pitch before we go?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to check out the trends, there'll always be more. We're kind of revamping the website a little bit. But if they ever want to check out the trends that we find on the public polling project, stuff like that, you can always go to bigdatapoll.com. If you scroll all the way down, the trends just started to get added. I think it was last month, but you'll always be able to see Biden's approval rating, right track, wrong track, the generic ballot, party affiliation. Yeah, there's my little moving bubbles, my little data bubbles. Love those things. If you put the mouse on it follows you. It's cool, right?
Oh, really?
And it's yeah, if you put it around, you can actually move some of the bubbles. See the lines going with it?
It's like connective tissue. Oh yeah, that's neat.
Because we're all connected communities.
Oh, and I like it.
We're part of a greater consciousness of public opinion and thought. Yeah, symbolic.
A new way to waste time on Rich's website.
This is what Rich does at 2:00 in the morning. And if on the bottom of that, you can check out some of the trends that we've done. There'll be a lot more that will be added. There are some of them. Yep. And that's the portfolio for the public polling project. You guys can always check it out there. If you want to, share it far and wide. We're obviously trying to grow it. It's completely supported by the public. We do media polling and stuff still, Allison, but this project, we're never going to make tainted by any industry. This is publicly supported, and that's that means they're my boss. So I only have a motivation to do a good job for them, for the public, for people who watch the show, for people who've seen our polling, so that's the idea behind the public polling project, that and transparency, because I really do wish more people would be more transparent in this field, and they're not. And it's just not good enough after all of their mistakes, their screw ups and their blunders, which many, including myself, believe aren't legitimate, earnest mistakes, but deception. I think we deserve that people deserve better and deserve more. So yeah, you can check out there, and still on Twitter, still on Getter at People's Pundit, on Getter at People's_Pundit on Twitter. But locals, of course, like you, is the best place to find me.
Yeah, for sure. Do you ever find though that like with the public as your boss that they expect to see certain results from you and then when you go in an opposite direction they sometimes can freak out? Like I've seen how you can have similar issues in corporate news on the outside. I'm not really quite sure if it's like the algorithm or what ends up happening, but people will say like I want objectivity, but then if you say something that goes in the opposite direction of what they're sort of thinking you're going to say, not all of them, but there will be those people who are like, I knew Allison was CIA or whatever. So do
Yeah.
you have any issues like and then also my other final question was, do you have issues also with YouTube or these platforms also kind of pushing back on your work? Like I've lost I think 800 subscribers in the last few months. People just tell me constantly you're getting unsubscribed, view counts way down. And so it seems like a difficult space to be in, the whether it's the viewers or the AI and the
Mm.
platforms. When you're trying to swim against the current, you can get it in different directions. Just curious some of the stuff you faced.
Yeah, well, on the first one, we do, sometimes, especially at the greater public, on my locals community, I don't get, this dissatisfaction if they want a certain result, and we don't come up with that. Locals very very different. They're all great in the community, but the greater public, we do sometimes. There'll be people like we had Biden at 37% last month. There's always going to be that person who is how could that be? How could you have them at 37? I would have expected it to be like 25 or 32 or, and they get angry or upset. Even we technically started this before the election in 2020, but it wasn't a national poll. It was states, battleground states. We had them vote on which state we were going to do. Then we crowdsourced it. And then we would do this. There were people who were upset with some of the state findings. But the good news is you hold the line, you tell them you're doing the job that you think is the best. And then after the election, hopefully, which we did, you prove that that was the correct call, or at least within the sampling error, very defendable. And then they come to respect you for it. So, but there are definitely people who are always going to be unhappy. The good news is, then they can choose to support it next month or not. And we just continue, and at least hopefully you get a reputation as someone who's going to tell you the right news, whether it's good or bad, and it's the truth, and that's the entire point. So I almost like it when I see examples like that,
Yeah.
And then on
Yeah.
YouTube, big problems,
Yeah.
I can't repeat what they did because I don't want to get you in trouble, but
Oh, you can't get me in any
I
more
love these
trouble than I'm
guys.
already in, Rich. I'm already way in the doghouse. I'm way worse than you are, I'm sure.
I'm in the biggest trouble I've ever been yet. I have 2 strikes. One's about to fall off, so I'm just shutting up. I'm not
Uh-huh.
even streaming. I'm not even even when I think it's back on already. I don't know because I haven't checked, Allison. The prior month, I'm just leaving it until I know I'm safe. But the prior month, love these guys from the gaggle. It's not their fault. All they did was quote somebody. They quoted somebody saying something, and it
Yeah.
didn't include widespread claims.
Mhm.
But then the next month, the other one said it. And then, like 2 weeks later,
Oh, no.
they came to me and they said, "You have 1 strike for this one." And then it happened again last week. So you have 2 strikes as your second strike. Next one, you're banned.
Oh.
So I actually asked you, Allison, what should a host do in the situation where a guest or somebody makes something that you feel is against your terms of use or your community guidelines? They have never answered because they don't care. They just want me off probably before the midterms.
Mhm.
Especially, I really think a lot had to do with my criticism of the supporting Ukraine. First of all, the public never wanted to support Ukraine. If it meant getting into a bigger conflict with Russia. When inflation got even more out of hand, people didn't even want to send the money anymore for lethal aid. Lethal aid actually was never really that popular. It was pretty split. But then as time went on, after about a month, support for anything collapsed. And they hated this concept of me showing the other side of the story. When it came to Ukraine, I actually got an email that said you will no longer be able to use any Google services for revenue, whether that's super chats or AdSense on your website, everything. Subscribers on YouTube, whatever, member fees down the line. If you continue with the claims that Ukraine did things wrong in Eastern Ukraine, like the Ukrainian army did things incorrect. So, in other words, you tell people that that Ukraine, killed civilians. I don't want to get into it, but acted inappropriately. We're not the good guys in Eastern Ukraine, and Google's got a problem with you. And I find it funny that every single episode that they've ever given me strike for in the last 6 months or warned me about, every single episode had something to do with Ukraine.
Interesting.
Even if it was me explaining to the viewers how the Russian economy was structured, and to do this will collapse their currency for about 24 hours before they are back in a stronger position than they were before. And, that Putin is going to take all of Ukraine. It's just going to take where the ethnic Russians are, which also happens to be where all the shale is and all the food is and everything. And this was a stupid strategy. And they hated that. So I find it a little bit coincidental. I do. And I don't really believe in coincidence.
Are you going to run for office ever, Rich? Somebody wanted to know.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. We got another prediction here too. Maybe he will. So Liz Cheney is going to be a Democrat, and Rich may run for office. So we'll see. Okay. Well,
I might. One day.
I'd like to see how your polls reflect your popularity when you're running for office. Sorry, there's a massive semi backing out of our driveway right now. I don't know if you can hear that, but
I can.
Anyway, all right, Rich. Thank you so much. People's Fun. It's always great to have you on. Thanks for staying on a little longer, and thanks everybody who's in the chat. Hopefully, this video will survive.
I hope so. Thanks, Allison.